My life began as a fragile thread tangled in a web of neglect and silence. Born to a young mother who barely knew what it meant to care, I was a shadow in a house where love was scarce and hope even scarcer. My earliest memories were of cold walls and colder eyes, where warmth was a stranger and kindness a rare visitor. My mother, Sarah, was lost in a world of fleeting pleasures and broken promises. The man who fathered me was a ghost, a name she whispered once before swallowing her regret in silence. She could have chosen to end this unintended chapter, but the doctor's words stopped her. It's too late. And so I was born into a world that barely wanted me. Sarah's mother, my grandmother Eleanor, was a woman hardened by years of disappointment. She believed, or perhaps clung desperately to the idea, that every child was a blessing, a gift from above. Yet, when Sarah's reckless choices led her to a life no better than neglect, Eleanor's patience wore thin. For years, Sarah and Eleanor struggled with the cruel irony of their situation. Sarah wanted freedom, Eleanor wanted order. I was caught in the middle, a fragile child tossed between indifference and duty. The neighborhood watched and whispered as families around us thrived while we withered. When Sarah was barely 20, desperate for change and desperate to prove herself, Eleanor convinced her to adopt a child from the local orphanage. That child was Mia, a bright-eyed girl who came into our lives like a ray of light. Mia was everything I wasn't: loved, cherished, given what I never had. At first, the family seemed complete. The house echoed with laughter and life, and for a fleeting moment, hope blossomed. Sarah doted on Mia, dressing her in beautiful clothes, taking her to the movies, painting her world in colors I could only dream of. But beneath the surface, the cracks began to show. Mia grew up well cared for, but I was left behind, an invisible sibling wandering a house full of tension. Sarah's love was reserved for the child she chose to keep, while I was the constant reminder of mistakes she wished to forget. School became my escape, but even there, I was an outsider. When I was 13, tragedy struck like a thunderclap. Sarah's husband, my stepfather, was killed in a senseless act of violence. The man who had been a source of stability for Mia and a fleeting protector for me was gone, leaving behind a family fractured and raw with grief. The loss twisted something dark inside Mia. The sweet, obedient girl I'd admired became rebellious and cruel. She dropped out of school, fell in with dangerous friends, and brought chaos into our home. The nights were filled with shouting, doors slammed, and the constant fear of what would come next. Sarah tried everything: doctors, therapists, prayers, but Mia's spiral was unstoppable. The house grew colder, emptier, a battleground where love was replaced by fear. Then came the moment that shattered all illusions. Mia became a mother herself, giving birth to a baby girl she named Kate. For a brief, shining moment, it seemed that Mia might find redemption in motherhood. But the darkness was too deep. She abandoned Kate, leaving the child in Eleanor's care before disappearing again. Eleanor, despite her bitterness, took on the impossible task of raising Kate, but her love was strict and cold, a far cry from the warmth every child deserves. I watched Kate grow under Eleanor's stern gaze, her innocence guarded by a fortress of rules and distance. Sarah was a ghost in Kate's life, appearing sporadically with empty promises and fading hopes. Kate's longing for her mother was a silent ache I recognized too well. We were both children of neglect, bound by pain but separated by fate. As I watched my family unravel, I vowed never to become the woman who abandoned her child. I promised myself that if I ever had a family, I would protect them from the darkness that consumed us. Years passed, and I found myself caught in a relentless struggle to break free from the shadows of my past. I left the suffocating house behind, the constant tension, the silent wars fought behind closed doors. I moved to a small city, clinging to hope like a lifeline. I wanted to build a life defined by love, not pain. There I met James, kind, steady, the man who would become my anchor. He was a truck driver, a man who traveled miles and miles, but always came home with warmth in his eyes. Our love grew quietly, tenderly, filling the empty spaces in my heart. When I told him about my past, about Sarah, Eleanor, Mia, and little Kate, his arms held me tighter. "We'll build something better," he promised. We dreamed of a family, children to fill the silent house with laughter. When I found out I was pregnant, my heart soared. This time, I was determined to do everything differently. But life has a cruel way of twisting even the purest hopes. Our baby was born healthy, a beautiful boy with wide eyes and a curious smile. We named him Michael. For months, we basked in the joy of new life, sleepless nights, first smiles. Then the unthinkable happened. One evening, as James was on a long haul trip, I found myself overwhelmed. The pressure, the exhaustion, the haunting memories of my childhood whispered lies in my ears. I wasn't good enough. I would fail. And so, in a moment of desperation, I made a choice I would regret for the rest of my life. I left Michael with a stranger, a family down the road who promised to care for him. I told James it was for the best, that we couldn't provide him the life he deserved. But deep inside, I felt the cold stab of guilt and shame. Days turned to weeks, and the weight of my secret crushed me. The universe seemed to punish us. James lost his job. Our apartment was evicted. Friends vanished. Misfortune became a constant companion. Years later, worn and broken, I applied for a job at a company I never expected, Dawson Enterprises. The moment I stepped into the office, the air thickened. Behind the desk sat a man with piercing eyes, a calm but unyielding presence. It was Michael, my son. He recognized me instantly. "I'm your mother," I whispered, the words bitter on my tongue. His face hardened. "You gave me away. You don't deserve to be here." His rejection shattered me, but I understood. The sins of the past cast long shadows. As I left that day, I realized that some wounds never heal, and some families are forever broken. After that confrontation, the silence between Michael and me grew thick, almost suffocating. Every time I tried to reach out, to explain, to apologize, he pulled further away, like I was a stranger trying to invade a fortress he had built to protect himself from pain. I wandered through my days feeling hollow, haunted by memories that refused to fade. How did love become betrayal? How did hope turn to ashes? James, too, had vanished from my life by then. The strain was too much for our fragile bond. Without him, the loneliness was a crushing weight. I threw myself into work, trying to distract myself from the torment within. But every corner held a reminder of what I'd lost, what I'd thrown away. One evening, I stumbled across a letter from Eleanor left among her things after she passed. In it, she confessed her regrets about the past, how she wished she had been kinder to me, how she feared the cycle of neglect was endless, passing from one generation to the next. Her words tore at my soul, but they also ignited a spark of determination. I vowed to break the chain. I tried reaching out to Mia, hoping to find some common ground, but she too was lost, swallowed by bitterness and resentment. She blamed me for everything, and the wounds between us seemed too deep to heal. In the months that followed, strange things began to happen. Shadows lurking in corners of my home, whispered voices I couldn't explain. I tried to convince myself it was stress, the pressure of guilt manifesting in paranoia. But one night, as rain hammered against the window, I saw a figure standing in the dark, a woman with eyes full of sorrow and anger. She spoke only one word. Remember, was it a ghost, a hallucination, or was it the past coming to demand justice? My nights became restless, plagued by nightmares of abandoned children, broken families, and the price of sin. The walls seemed to close in. The burden of my secrets grew heavier. And then the final blow came. Michael, despite his pain, had begun to investigate. He uncovered the truth about his birth, about the family that had abandoned him. He confronted me one last time, his voice cold as steel. "You destroyed us all. You robbed me of a chance at a family. I hope you suffer for it." His words echoed in my heart as I sank into the darkness, knowing that my mistakes had doomed us all. The family I longed for, the peace I sought, was forever lost in the shadows of my past. Days turned into weeks, and my life spiraled into a bleak monotony. I drifted like a ghost through my own existence, haunted by the memories of what might have been. The warmth of family, the laughter of children, all seemed like distant dreams, snatched away by my own hands. I moved to a small, cramped apartment on the edge of the city, a place where shadows gathered and hope went to die. The phone rarely rang, and when it did, it was news of yet another misfortune. A friend lost to addiction, a job opportunity vanished, or a landlord demanding rent I could not pay. I kept to myself, trying to atone in silence, but the world was unforgiving. People whispered, judging the woman who had abandoned her child, the mother who had broken a family. One cold evening, as winter's chill seeped through the cracked windows, I found a letter slipped under my door. The handwriting was unfamiliar, shaky, but the words were unmistakable. "Mom, I know who you are. I know what you did, but I'm not here to hate you. I just want answers." The letter was unsigned, but I knew without reading further that it was from Michael. Tears blurred my vision as I read his questions. The pain, the confusion, the longing to understand why. Summoning the last of my strength, I wrote back. I told him everything, laying bare the guilt, the fear, the desperate choices made in darkness. Days later, a knock echoed through my lonely apartment. Michael stood at the door, eyes filled with storms of emotion. We talked for hours, the conversations raw and painful, but necessary. I saw glimpses of the boy I had lost and the man he had become, but forgiveness remained just out of reach. In the weeks that followed, Michael began visiting more often. Slowly, a fragile bond formed, but the past was a shadow between us, dark and unyielding. Then the nightmares returned with a vengeance. I dreamt of my mother's harsh words, of Eleanor's fading smile, of Mia's bitterness. I saw little Kate's innocent face, forever etched in my heart. One night, after a particularly vivid nightmare, I awoke to a silence so deep it screamed. The cold was unbearable, as if the warmth had fled my body. I realized then I was alone, completely, utterly alone. No family to hold me, no future to dream of. The weight of my sins crushed me into oblivion, and in that endless night I understood the final truth. Some mistakes cannot be undone, and some wounds will never heal. Winter had settled in with an unforgiving grasp, blanketing the city in gray skies and biting cold that seemed to pierce right through the soul. Inside my cramped apartment, the air was stale, heavy with the scent of regret and silence. Silence louder than any storm raging outside. I was trapped in a prison of my own making, and every breath I took reminded me of the family I had shattered. Michael's visits had all but stopped. At first, he tried, the hesitant calls, the brief messages, but the anger and pain carved deep lines between us, invisible but impenetrable. He was a man now, scarred by a childhood left abandoned, by the mother who had chosen absence over love. I could hear the bitterness in his voice when we spoke, see the coldness in his eyes when we met, a silent accusation that crushed me more than any words ever could. I wanted to reach out, to explain, to beg for forgiveness, but the gulf between us was an ocean too wide to cross. I felt myself fading in his world, a ghost haunting memories he wished to bury. Days bled into nights, and the loneliness wrapped around me like a shroud. The rooms I once filled with laughter were now empty, echoes of my failures reverberating off the walls. My daughters' faces flashed in my mind, bright, hopeful once, now marked by the scars left by neglect and pain. My son, my lost son, haunted every thought. Then came the phone call that shattered what little fragile hope I had left. Mia, Eleanor's daughter, spoke with a voice cold and distant. Mom passed away last night. It was peaceful, no suffering. The finality of those words crushed me. Eleanor, the woman who had shared this fractured journey, was gone, standing by her grave in the cold wind beneath a bleak sky. I felt the weight of all our failures descend upon me like a storm. I returned home to a letter slipped beneath my door. The handwriting was unmistakable. Michael's. My heart clenched as I read the words, each one stabbing deeper than the last. I tried to forgive you. I wanted a family. I wanted to believe in us. But the wounds run too deep. I'm leaving. Goodbye. Tears streamed down my face as I crumpled the paper, the final severing of what little remained. The last thread of hope snapped, and I was left with nothing but cold emptiness. The nights grew darker, the silence louder. I sank into despair, haunted by the ghosts of my past, memories of laughter, love, and warmth twisted into reminders of betrayal, abandonment, and loss. I saw my daughters' faces, the joy stolen from their childhoods, the pain etched deep in their eyes. My son, the child I had given away like an unwanted possession, yet who had found his own path, only to turn away from me in unforgiving judgment. The crushing guilt was suffocating. I was drowning in it, unable to find breath or relief. One evening, as the wind howled outside and rain lashed against the windows, I found myself staring at the empty crib that once held hope. The weight of my choices pressed on me with unbearable force. I reached for a bottle of pills, the cold metal a promise of escape from this endless torment. Memories flashed before my eyes, Michael's broken gaze, the laughter of my daughters before the darkness took hold, the face of my husband lost to time. With trembling hands, I swallowed the bitter capsules, feeling the cold embrace of oblivion creeping over me. As the world blurred and shadows closed in, a final thought pierced the darkness, a whispered apology to those I had hurt. to the family I had destroyed, because some stories end not with redemption, but with tragedy, and mine was one such story.